The kingdom thought she was returning for revenge. The truth was far more terrifying. The gates of Blackthorn City stood open beneath a gray winter sky as thousands of people crowded the stone walls overlooking the main road. Merchants abandoned their stalls. Guards left their usual posts. Noble families filled balconies that overlooked the capital's entrance. The rumors had arrived weeks ago, spreading from village to village like wildfire carried by the wind. At first, nobody believed them. Then the reports became impossible to ignore. A woman was coming. Not an army. Not a conqueror. Just a woman. Yet entire territories had begun changing their alliances after meeting her. Ancient pacts that had remained neutral for generations suddenly pledged loyalty to her cause. Trade routes shifted. Border disputes disappeared overnight. Even neighboring kingdoms were sending envoys to learn the truth. And now she was here. A deep silence settled over the city as a line of riders finally appeared in the distance. The crowd leaned forward. The winter wind swept through the streets, carrying the smell of snow and pine from the mountains beyond the capital. At the front of the procession rode a woman dressed in a long silver-gray cloak. Her hood partially concealed her face, but it did nothing to hide the calm confidence in her posture. She sat perfectly straight in the saddle, moving with the quiet certainty of someone who no longer needed anyone's approval. Olivia Hayes had returned. 3 years earlier, she had left this kingdom with nothing. No title, no allies, no future. Most people believed she would disappear into history. Many had forgotten her entirely. Yet the older wolves in the crowd had not forgotten. They remembered the moon ceremony. They remembered the humiliation. Most of all, they remembered the Alpha who had rejected his fated mate before the eyes of the entire kingdom. The whispers began immediately. Some sounded nervous. Others sounded curious. A few sounded afraid. Olivia ignored all of them. Her blue eyes remained fixed on the palace rising above the city. Blackthorn Palace stood at the highest point of the capital, its dark stone towers cutting into the clouds like ancient spears. Once upon a time, the sight of it had filled her with hope. Now it filled her with nothing at all. That realization surprised her. For years she had imagined this moment. She had imagined anger. She had imagined satisfaction. Perhaps even sorrow. Instead, she felt strangely peaceful. The wounds that once defined her no longer controlled her. The young Omega who left this city 3 years ago would barely recognize the woman returning today. As the procession entered the capital, people stepped aside instinctively. No orders were given. No guards forced the path open. The crowd simply moved. Watching, waiting, wondering. High above the city, inside the royal palace, another person stood beside a window overlooking the road. Alpha King Ethan Blackwell had not moved for nearly 10 minutes. His silver eyes remained locked on the approaching riders. Advisors filled the room behind him, speaking in worried voices. Ethan heard none of it, because for the first time in 3 years, he was looking at Olivia Hayes, the woman he once believed he would never see again. And as the distance between them slowly disappeared, a feeling he had spent years trying to bury returned with terrifying clarity. Regret. The throne room had hosted celebrations, treaties, and royal ceremonies for generations, but never had it felt as heavy as it did that morning. Advisors stood in small groups beneath towering stained glass windows, speaking in voices barely above whispers. Servants moved carefully through the room, sensing the tension that hung over every corner of the palace. Yet despite the nervous energy surrounding him, Ethan Blackwell remained silent. He stood beside the largest window in the royal chamber, watching the city below. Snowflakes drifted through the gray morning sky. The streets were packed with people. Every road leading toward the palace had become crowded with citizens hoping to catch a glimpse of the woman who had returned. The woman he had spent 3 years trying to forget. Behind him, another advisor cleared his throat. "Your Majesty." Ethan did not turn. "What is it?" "More delegations have arrived." The older man hesitated. Representatives from the Eastern Highlands, the River Clans, and the Northern Territories. That finally drew Ethan's attention. He turned slowly. "All of them." The advisor nodded. They arrived before dawn. A strange silence followed. 3 years ago, none of those territories would have sent representatives for Olivia Hayes. Most barely acknowledged her existence. Now they were crossing hundreds of miles to stand beside her. The shift unsettled everyone in the room. It unsettled Ethan most of all, because he understood something the others did not. Olivia had never sought power. Not once. The woman he remembered had been gentle, quiet, compassionate to a fault. She had cared more about helping strangers than improving her own position. The idea of her building political influence across multiple territories would have sounded absurd 3 years ago. Yet reality stood outside his palace gates, proving otherwise. Another advisor stepped forward. Younger, less careful. We should not allow her inside. Several people immediately nodded. The people support her, someone added. That is exactly why she is dangerous, the younger advisor replied. Ethan felt irritation rise immediately. Dangerous. The word echoed through the chamber. How many times had he heard it over the past month? Every report used the same description. Dangerous. Influential. Unpredictable. Yet none of them understood the truth. Olivia was not dangerous because she wanted something. She was dangerous because she no longer needed anything from them. Before Ethan could respond, the massive doors opened. A palace messenger hurried inside carrying a sealed letter. The young man knelt immediately. Your Majesty. Ethan accepted the envelope. The seal stamped into the wax was unfamiliar. A silver crescent moon surrounded by stars. Several advisors visibly stiffened. Ethan carefully broke the seal and unfolded the letter. The message contained only one sentence. His eyes narrowed as he read it. Then he read it again. The room waited. No one dared speak. Finally, one of the advisors gathered enough courage to ask, "What does it say?" Ethan lowered the letter slowly. For a moment, the expression on his face revealed something none of them had seen before. Not fear, not anger. Shock. Genuine shock. He looked toward the palace gates far below, toward the woman who had just entered the capital. Then he spoke. She is not requesting an audience. Silence filled the chamber. Then why did she come? Someone asked. Ethan stared at the letter in his hand. The words seemed impossible. Yet there they were. Written clearly in elegant handwriting, he recognized immediately. Because, he said quietly, she is inviting us to hers. The invitation changed everything. Within an hour, the entire capital was talking about it. Not because a meeting had been requested. Kings received requests every day. What shocked people was the reversal. 3 years ago, Olivia Hayes had stood at the bottom of the kingdom's social ladder. Today, she had entered Blackthorn City without asking permission and invited the Alpha King to meet her on her terms. The idea felt impossible. Yet nobody laughed. Nobody dismissed it as arrogance. Because too much had changed since she left. Ethan stood alone after the advisors departed, the letter still resting in his hand. Outside his chamber window, church bells echoed across the city. The sound pulled memories from places he had spent years trying to lock away. Memories of another winter. Another ceremony. Another version of himself. Slowly, he closed his eyes. And for the first time since Olivia returned, he allowed himself to remember. 3 years earlier, Blackthorn Palace had looked entirely different. Not physically, emotionally. The halls had been filled with anticipation. Every pack in the kingdom had sent representatives. Nobles traveled hundreds of miles to attend the moon ceremony. It was one of the most important traditions among the wolves. The night when fate revealed destined bonds. The night when the future of the kingdom often changed forever. Ethan had been 29 then, newly crowned, respected, confident. The entire kingdom believed his reign would usher in a golden age. Looking back now, he realized how little he truly understood. Olivia Hayes had arrived at the palace like hundreds of others. Quiet, nervous, easily overlooked. She wore a simple silver dress borrowed from a family friend because she could not afford one herself. No famous bloodline. No powerful relatives. No influence. Most people never noticed her. Ethan certainly had not. Not at first. The ceremony itself began beneath thousands of lanterns hanging from crystal arches. Music filled the grand ballroom. Laughter echoed from every corner. Hope seemed to float through the air. Then everything changed. Ethan still remembered the exact moment. A sudden warmth across his wrist. A pulse unlike anything he had ever felt before. The ancient bond mark had appeared without warning. Brilliant silver light spread across his skin. Gasps erupted throughout the room. Conversation stopped instantly. Every eye turned toward him. Then someone pointed across the ballroom. The matching mark had appeared on Olivia Hayes. Ethan opened his eyes. The memory remained as sharp as broken glass. Even now, he could see her expression. Shock, confusion, hope. That last part hurt most. Because he knew exactly when that hope disappeared. A knock interrupted his thoughts. The palace doors opened before he answered. One of the royal guards stepped inside and bowed. "Your Majesty." Ethan straightened immediately. "What is it?" "The gathering has been arranged." The guard hesitated. "At the old assembly hall." Ethan frowned. The location surprised him. The assembly hall had not been used for royal negotiations in decades. It stood outside palace grounds, closer to the city itself. Neutral territory. The choice was deliberate. Olivia had chosen a place where no throne existed. No advantage. No hierarchy. Ethan slowly folded the letter and slipped it into his coat pocket. Through the window, snow continued falling over Blackthorn City. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, the woman he once rejected was waiting. And for the first time in 3 years, Ethan found himself wondering about something he had avoided asking. What exactly had Olivia become after she left him behind? The silver light spread across the ballroom so quickly that it seemed to steal the breath from everyone present. Hundreds of guests stood frozen beneath the crystal chandeliers, their faces illuminated by the glow radiating from 2 matching bond marks. One rested on the wrist of Alpha King Ethan Blackwell. The other shimmered on the wrist of Olivia Hayes. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even the musicians had fallen silent. The only sound came from the crackling of candles lining the enormous hall. Olivia stared at the mark on her skin in disbelief. The ancient symbol pulsed softly beneath her wrist like a second heartbeat. She had grown up hearing stories about fated mates. Every child in the kingdom had. Most believed the stories were little more than legends. Others spent their entire lives hoping fate would someday choose them. Olivia had never expected anything extraordinary to happen to her. Yet now the impossible had happened in front of the entire kingdom. Slowly, she lifted her gaze. Across the ballroom, Ethan stood perfectly still. Their eyes met. A strange warmth moved through her chest. Not overwhelming. Not magical. Simply familiar. Like recognizing someone she had somehow known her entire life. Around them, whispers erupted. Nobles leaned toward one another. Advisors exchanged shocked looks. Several older wolves smiled knowingly. The appearance of a fated bond was rare. The appearance of one involving the Alpha King was almost unheard of. Olivia could feel dozens of eyes studying her. Some curious, some impressed, others less welcoming. She understood why. Every noble family in attendance had spent years imagining who Ethan's mate might be. Most expected a powerful daughter from an influential bloodline, not an omega from a modest village. The attention made her uncomfortable, but beneath the nervousness something else began growing. Hope. Small at first. Fragile. Yet impossible to ignore. Ethan was looking at her. Not past her. Not through her. At her. For the first time in her life, Olivia felt as though fate had opened a door she never knew existed. The master of ceremonies stepped forward, his voice trembling with excitement. A sacred bond has been revealed. Applause began spreading through the ballroom. Guests smiled. Some even cheered. Tradition dictated what happened next. The Alpha would publicly acknowledge the bond before the kingdom. The future Luna would be welcomed. The kingdom would celebrate. Everything seemed beautifully simple. Yet as Olivia watched Ethan, a small feeling of unease appeared. It lasted only a second. A subtle hesitation in his expression. A shadow crossing his face before disappearing again. Most people never noticed it. Olivia did. The warmth in her chest weakened slightly. Nearby, members of the royal council approached Ethan. They whispered quietly among themselves. Their faces remained carefully controlled, but Olivia sensed tension. One advisor glanced toward her. The look lasted less than a second before he looked away. It was enough. Something was wrong. The applause continued. The crowd waited for Ethan to speak. Olivia clasped her hands together, trying to steady her breathing. The future she had imagined only moments earlier suddenly felt uncertain. Across the ballroom, Ethan remained surrounded by advisors. Their conversation ended. Slowly, he turned back toward the crowd, toward her, toward the bond glowing between them. And as the room fell silent once again, Olivia felt her heart begin to pound for reasons she could not yet understand. The silence lasted only a few seconds, but to Olivia it felt endless. Hundreds of people stood beneath the crystal chandeliers waiting for Ethan Blackwell to speak. The bond marks still glowed on both of their wrists, undeniable proof of what fate had chosen. Tradition left little room for uncertainty. The Alpha acknowledged the bond. The kingdom celebrated. Life moved forward. Yet the expression on Ethan's face told a different story. Olivia watched him carefully. The warmth she had felt moments earlier was fading, replaced by a growing unease she could not explain. Around him, the royal advisors remained close. Their whispered conversation had ended, but the tension surrounding them lingered. One older council member folded his arms tightly across his chest. Another avoided looking in Olivia's direction altogether. It was as though a decision had already been made. The master of ceremonies smiled nervously and gestured toward Ethan. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice echoing through the ballroom. "The kingdom awaits your acknowledgement." More applause followed. Guests smiled expectantly. Some raised glasses in celebration. Olivia could almost see the future everyone assumed was about to begin. Then Ethan took a slow breath. The room immediately quieted. Every eye focused on the Alpha King. Olivia's heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. Ethan stepped forward. His gaze moved across the crowd before settling briefly on her. Something flickered in his silver eyes. Regret perhaps, or hesitation. Whatever it was, it vanished quickly. When he finally spoke, his voice carried clearly across the entire ballroom. "The bond is real." Relief spread through the crowd. Smiles returned. Several people began clapping again. Then Ethan continued, "But I will not accept it." The applause died instantly. The words struck the room with the force of a winter storm. Olivia froze. For a moment, she genuinely thought she had misheard him. Around her, the crowd reacted with visible confusion. Guests exchanged shocked glances. Conversations erupted immediately. The master of ceremonies stared at Ethan in disbelief. Even some members of the royal council appeared stunned by the public declaration. Ethan remained calm, controlled. Yet Olivia noticed the tension in his jaw. This was not easy for him. Somehow that realization made the moment hurt even more. "Your Majesty," one noble whispered loudly. "Surely there has been some mistake." Ethan shook his head. "There is no mistake." The bond marks continued glowing beneath the ballroom lights. Silent proof that fate had chosen. Silent proof that he was refusing anyway. Olivia could no longer hear the conversations around her. The room seemed distant, blurred. Her chest felt hollow. A few minutes earlier she had imagined possibilities she had never allowed herself to dream about. Now those dreams were collapsing in front of an entire kingdom. She lowered her eyes to the glowing mark on her wrist. The symbol looked exactly the same as before. Fate had not changed its mind. Only Ethan had. A cold realization settled over her. This moment would never disappear. Every person in this ballroom would remember it. Every story told afterward would begin here. The Omega who was chosen by fate and rejected by the Alpha King. Slowly, Olivia lifted her head. Her eyes found Ethan again. He looked back at her. Neither spoke. Neither moved. Yet in that silence, something important broke. Not the bond. Something else. Something far more fragile. And as whispers spread through the kingdom's most powerful room, Olivia Hayes realized her life had just changed forever. The whispers followed Olivia everywhere she went. They filled the ballroom long after Ethan's words had settled into the hearts of everyone present. Some voices sounded shocked. Others sounded sympathetic. A few carried something far worse. Relief. Olivia stood perfectly still beneath the crystal chandeliers while conversations spread around her like ripples across water. Nobody approached her. Nobody offered comfort. The kingdom had just witnessed an event most believed impossible. Fate had chosen. The Alpha had refused. And now no one seemed to know how to behave. The silver bond mark still glowed faintly on her wrist. She stared at it for several seconds before pulling her sleeve over it. The simple movement felt strangely symbolic. If fate could be ignored so easily, perhaps it deserved to be hidden. Across the ballroom, Ethan remained surrounded by advisors. Several appeared deeply concerned. Others looked satisfied. Olivia noticed one council member speaking animatedly while gesturing toward her. She did not need to hear the words to understand their meaning. She had become a problem, an inconvenience, a mistake that needed to be explained away. The realization hurt less than she expected, perhaps because the worst part had already happened. The future she imagined was gone. Nothing anyone said afterward could change that. Slowly, she turned toward the nearest exit. A few guests stepped aside as she passed. Most avoided eye contact. Others pretended not to notice her at all. The deliberate indifference felt more painful than open cruelty. Olivia kept walking. The cool air of the palace corridor greeted her the moment she left the ballroom. Silence replaced the whispers. For the first time all evening, she could hear her own thoughts. She moved through the empty hallway with measured steps, refusing to run, refusing to cry. The palace windows reflected moonlight across polished marble floors. Outside, snow drifted gently through the night sky. Everything looked peaceful, beautiful even. It seemed unfair that the world could remain unchanged while hers had completely fallen apart. When she finally reached the outer courtyard, the cold winter air struck her cheeks. She welcomed it. The sharp chill helped clear the fog, clouding her mind. Olivia crossed the snow-covered stone path and stopped near a frozen fountain. For several moments, she simply stood there, breathing, thinking, trying to understand how fate could lead someone to a door only to watch it close. Footsteps echoed behind her. She did not need to turn around to know who it was. Ethan stopped several feet away. Neither spoke immediately. The silence between them felt heavier than any conversation. Finally, Ethan exhaled slowly. Olivia. Hearing her name in his voice nearly shattered the fragile control she had been holding together. She kept her eyes on the frozen fountain. Do not. The words came out quieter than she intended. Ethan fell silent again. Snowflakes drifted between them. The distance separating them was only a few feet. It felt like miles. I never wanted to hurt you, he said at last. Olivia closed her eyes briefly. The statement was honest. That somehow made it worse. Because if this was what happened when someone tried not to hurt her, she could not imagine what happened when they actually intended to. Slowly, she turned toward him. Her blue eyes met his silver ones. There were dozens of questions she could have asked, dozens of accusations she could have made. Instead, she asked only one. Then why did you do it? Ethan opened his mouth to answer. But for the first time all evening, the Alpha King had no words. Snow continued falling across the courtyard as Ethan searched for an answer that refused to come. Olivia stood before him beneath the pale glow of lantern light, waiting. Not demanding, not angry, simply waiting. Somehow that made the moment harder. The truth was not complicated. Yet speaking it aloud would expose something Ethan had spent years convincing himself was justified. He looked away briefly toward the frozen fountain. The ice covering its surface reflected the moonlight like polished glass. Because I was afraid, he said quietly. Olivia frowned. Of all the answers she expected, that was not one of them. Ethan gave a bitter smile that never reached his eyes. Not of you. The words hung in the cold air. Then of what? He exhaled slowly. Memories surfaced whether he wanted them to or not. Endless council meetings, political negotiations, warnings from advisors, expectations from noble families. Every conversation after his coronation had carried the same message. Protect stability. Protect the kingdom. Protect the future. When I became Alpha King, he said, everyone had a plan for what my reign should look like. Olivia remained silent. Ethan continued. The council wanted alliances. The noble houses wanted influence. The neighboring territories wanted guarantees. He laughed softly, though there was no humor in it. Then fate chose an Omega from a small village. Understanding slowly appeared in Olivia's eyes. Not forgiveness. Understanding. They told you I would be a weakness. Ethan's silence answered for him. The realization settled between them. Olivia felt an unexpected wave of disappointment. Not because the explanation was cruel. Because it was ordinary. She had spent 3 years wondering why fate had not been enough. Why she had not been enough. Now she knew. Politics. Expectations. Fear. Human reasons hiding behind royal titles. And you listened to them, she said. Ethan looked down. Yes. The honesty hurt more than excuses ever could. For a long moment neither spoke. Snow gathered along the stone edges of the courtyard. The palace lights glowed warmly behind them. Somewhere in the distance, the music from the celebration had resumed, though it sounded impossibly far away. Olivia studied Ethan carefully. 3 years ago, she would have given anything to hear him admit the truth. She would have spent nights imagining this conversation, imagining an apology, imagining closure. Yet standing here, now, she felt surprisingly calm. The pain was still there, but it no longer controlled her. Do you know what happened after I left? She asked quietly. Ethan's expression tightened. No, Olivia nodded slowly. Most people do not. She looked toward the falling snow. The first winter was the hardest. Her voice remained steady, but Ethan could hear the weight beneath it. I had no home, no allies. No idea where to go. Guilt twisted inside him. Olivia continued before he could speak. At first I thought something was wrong with me. The words landed harder than any accusation. I kept wondering why fate chose me if I was so easy to reject. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Regret washed through him with painful clarity. Olivia looked at him one last time. The sadness in her expression had changed. It no longer belonged to a wounded Omega searching for answers. It belonged to someone who had already survived the answers. Eventually, she said softly, I stopped asking what was wrong with me. Ethan felt a chill that had nothing to do with winter. And what did you discover? Olivia's blue eyes met his. Calm, strong, unshaken. That the wrong thing was never me. The words lingered in the cold air long after Olivia spoke them. Ethan stood motionless beside the frozen fountain, unable to look away from her. 3 years earlier, the woman standing before him would never have spoken with such certainty. She had been kind then, gentle, always willing to doubt herself before doubting anyone else. The woman before him still carried that kindness somewhere beneath the surface, but it was now protected by something stronger. Confidence. Not the loud confidence of someone trying to prove their worth. The quiet confidence of someone who already knew it. Snow settled across the courtyard stones as silence stretched between them. Finally, Ethan spoke. What happened after you left? Olivia lowered her gaze briefly. The question felt strange. For years she had imagined telling her story. Yet now that the moment had arrived, she realized the story no longer belonged to the pain. It belonged to the journey that followed. I walked for 3 days, she said. Without a destination. Ethan listened carefully. Olivia's voice remained calm, but each memory carried weight. I thought I would find another pack. Somewhere I could start over. A faint smile touched her lips. Most turned me away. Ethan frowned. Why? Olivia laughed softly. Because everyone had heard the story. The answer landed heavily between them. News of the Alpha King's rejection had spread faster than either of them imagined. Olivia continued. Some people felt sorry for me. Others thought I must have done something wrong. She glanced toward the palace behind them. Most assumed there was a reason an Alpha King would reject his fated mate. Ethan looked away. Shame tightened inside his chest. Olivia noticed, but did not comment. She had carried that burden long enough. Eventually, I stopped trying to explain myself, she said. I stopped trying to convince people I was worth accepting. Her eyes drifted upward toward the falling snow. That was when everything started changing. Ethan felt a strange unease. He had read reports, heard rumors, yet none of them explained how an abandoned Omega had returned with enough influence to make kingdoms listen. What changed? Olivia smiled slightly. This time the expression carried warmth. Genuine warmth. I met people who did not care about my past. The answer surprised him. Where? Beyond the northern mountains. Her eyes softened as memories returned. A settlement called Haven Ridge. Ethan searched his memory. The name meant nothing. Olivia noticed. Most maps do not show it. She folded her arms against the cold. It is a place where people go when they no longer belong anywhere else. For the first time, Ethan understood. Haven Ridge had not saved Olivia because of power. It had saved her because it offered something she had lost. A place to belong. They gave me work, Olivia continued. A room. A chance to begin again. Her expression grew thoughtful. No one asked about bond marks. No one cared about titles. Ethan listened in silence. Every detail somehow made his regret worse. Not because Olivia had suffered. Because she had healed without him. The realization unsettled him more than he expected. For 3 years he had imagined she might still be angry. Still waiting for answers. Still trapped in the moment he rejected her. Instead she had built an entirely new life. One that no longer revolved around him. Olivia looked toward the city lights glowing beyond the courtyard walls. That was where I learned something important. Ethan felt his heartbeat quicken. What? Olivia's blue eyes met his once more. Calm. Certain. Unshaken. The people who truly value you never ask someone else's permission first. The words stayed with Ethan long after Olivia spoke them. The people who truly value you never ask someone else's permission first. Standing in the quiet courtyard, he realized how different the woman before him had become. 3 years ago, Olivia would have measured her worth through the eyes of others. Through acceptance. Through belonging. Through the approval of people with power. That version of her was gone. The realization left him with an uncomfortable question. If she no longer needed validation from the kingdom, Then why had she returned? The answer mattered. Not only to him, to everyone. Snow drifted lazily through the night air as the city lights flickered beyond the palace walls. Olivia seemed lost in thought for a moment before turning toward the palace gates. I should go. Ethan's chest tightened unexpectedly. Wait. She paused, but did not look back immediately. There is something I still do not understand. Olivia turned slowly. Her expression remained calm. What? Ethan hesitated. The reports. A faint smile touched her lips. Which ones? All of them. He stepped closer. The alliances. The territories. The leaders traveling hundreds of miles to stand beside you. His silver eyes searched hers. How did that happen? For the first time that evening, Olivia laughed. Not bitterly. Not defensively. Genuinely. The sound surprised him. That is what everyone keeps asking. Ethan folded his arms against the cold. Then answer me. Olivia glanced toward the distant city before speaking. The kingdom believes influence comes from power. Her eyes returned to his. Most people are wrong. Ethan listened carefully. Olivia continued. When I arrived in Haven Ridge, nobody trusted anyone. Every person there carried some version of the same story. Rejection, loss, betrayal, failure. Her expression softened. Some had been abandoned by their packs. Others had left willingly. A few had nowhere else to go. Ethan could picture it. A forgotten settlement filled with forgotten people. What did you do? He asked. Olivia seemed surprised by the question. Nothing extraordinary. People do not cross kingdoms for nothing extraordinary. She smiled slightly. Maybe they do. Ethan frowned. Olivia continued. I listened. The answer sounded almost absurd. That is all. Not all. She shook her head. I helped where I could. Solved problems when they appeared. Introduced people to one another. Encouraged them to work together. Ethan stared at her. That built alliances? No. Her eyes sparkled with quiet amusement. Trust built alliances. The answer settled heavily between them. Ethan thought about the kingdoms now supporting her. The territories sending representatives. The leaders willing to stand beside her. Suddenly the reports made sense. Olivia had not gained influence through force. She had earned it through relationships. Through loyalty. Through people choosing to follow her. The same lesson she had learned years ago. The people who truly value you never ask someone else's permission first. Before Ethan could respond, footsteps approached from the palace entrance. Both turned. A royal messenger hurried across the courtyard carrying a sealed document. His face was pale, nervous. He bowed immediately upon reaching them. Your Majesty. Ethan accepted the parchment. What is it? The messenger swallowed. An urgent report from the southern border. Ethan broke the seal and quickly scanned the contents. As he read, the color drained from his face. Olivia noticed immediately. What happened? Ethan lowered the document slowly. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he looked directly at her. A neighboring kingdom has issued an ultimatum. The winter wind swept through the courtyard. The messenger looked away uneasily. Ethan's voice dropped lower. And they specifically requested you by name. The courtyard seemed colder after the messenger left. Snow continued falling, settling across the palace stones in a thin white layer, but neither Ethan nor Olivia noticed it anymore. The sealed document remained in Ethan's hand. The words written inside had changed the atmosphere completely. A neighboring kingdom had issued an ultimatum, and somehow Olivia Hayes had become the center of it. Let me see it, she said calmly. Ethan hesitated for only a moment before handing her the parchment. Olivia unfolded it and read carefully beneath the lantern light. The message was formal, precise, yet the meaning was unmistakable. The Kingdom of Valoria requested immediate negotiations regarding a newly proposed alliance. The request itself was not unusual. What made it extraordinary was a single line near the end. The presence of Olivia Hayes was considered essential. Olivia read the sentence twice before lowering the document. Interesting. Ethan stared at her. Interesting. She folded the parchment neatly. Most rulers would send requests through official channels. A faint smile appeared on her lips. Valoria rarely does anything without a reason. Ethan frowned. You know their king? Olivia looked toward the city lights. I know his daughter. The answer surprised him. Princess Alara? Olivia nodded. Ethan felt another uncomfortable realization settle into place. Every time he learned something new about Olivia's life after leaving Blackthorn, the distance between who she had been and who she had become seemed larger. 3 years ago, She had never spoken with royalty. Now she casually referred to foreign princesses by name. How, he asked. Olivia smiled slightly. She spent 6 months in Haven Ridge. Ethan blinked. The Princess of Valoria lived in Haven Ridge. Not as a princess. Olivia's expression softened. As a traveler. The explanation somehow felt perfectly consistent with everything else she had said. Haven Ridge again. The place that kept appearing whenever anyone asked how Olivia's influence had grown. Ethan realized he wanted to know more about it than any political report could explain. Before he could ask another question, Olivia handed back the document. This is not about me. Ethan raised an eyebrow. They requested you specifically. Yes. Her blue eyes met his. Because they know something your advisors do not. The statement immediately captured his attention. What? Olivia folded her arms against the winter wind. Kingdoms are changing. Ethan glanced toward the palace towers rising above them. They have always changed. Not like this. Her voice remained calm, but there was conviction beneath it. For generations, leaders built influence through fear, territory, and wealth. She looked toward the sleeping city. People are starting to value something else. Ethan knew she was talking about trust again. About loyalty freely given rather than demanded. About the same principle that had transformed and abandoned Omega into someone entire kingdoms now listened to. The realization unsettled him. Not because she was wrong. Because she might be right. A distant bell echoed from somewhere beyond the palace walls. Midnight. Olivia took a step backward. The meeting tomorrow will answer a lot of questions. Ethan studied her carefully. And create new ones. She laughed softly. Probably. For a moment, the years between them seemed to disappear. He caught a glimpse of the woman he once knew. Then the moment passed. Olivia turned toward the palace gates. Get some rest, Ethan. He watched her begin walking away through the falling snow. Olivia. She stopped without turning around. Ethan looked at the footprints forming behind her. The words came before he could stop them. I am sorry. Silence followed. Snow drifted gently between them. Then Olivia finally looked back over her shoulder. Her expression was not angry. It was not forgiving either. I know, she said quietly. And somehow that answer hurt more than if she had never said anything at all. The next morning arrived beneath a sky the color of silver. Snow still covered the rooftops of Blackthorn City, but the streets below were already crowded. Word of the upcoming meeting had spread faster than anyone anticipated. Merchants whispered about it while opening their shops. Travelers discussed it beside roadside fires. Noble families gathered near palace balconies hoping to witness history unfold. Everyone sensed that something important was about to happen. Inside the old assembly hall, preparations had been underway since dawn. The building stood apart from the palace and older than most structures in the capital. Built from pale stone and dark timber, it carried none of the grandeur associated with royal authority. That was precisely why Olivia had chosen it. No throne stood inside. No elevated platform. No symbol favored one side over another. The room belonged equally to everyone who entered. Ethan arrived first. Several advisors accompanied him, though none looked comfortable. They had spent the entire morning questioning the wisdom of attending a meeting organized by Olivia. Ethan ignored their concerns. For the first time in years, he found himself more interested in listening than controlling the outcome. The realization felt unfamiliar. Minutes later, the heavy doors opened again. Silence spread through the hall immediately. Olivia entered accompanied by a small group of representatives from different territories. Ethan recognized several faces from diplomatic reports. A northern governor, a trade leader from the eastern rivers, even a respected elder from the mountain packs. None of them walked ahead of Olivia. None walked behind her. They moved beside her. Equals. The detail did not escape Ethan's notice. Olivia greeted each person she passed with the same calm respect. No dramatic entrance. No display of power. Yet somehow every eye followed her. Ethan suddenly understood something his advisors never would. Influence did not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it simply existed. The meeting began without ceremony. Representatives took their seats around a circular table. The atmosphere remained polite but tense. Then the doors opened one final time. A woman stepped inside wearing the colors of Valoria. Her golden cloak carried the royal crest of the neighboring kingdom. Several people immediately stood. Ethan recognized her at once. Princess Alara. Olivia smiled warmly. It has been too long. The princess crossed the room and embraced her without hesitation. The gesture shocked nearly everyone present. Royal protocol rarely allowed such familiarity during official gatherings. Yet neither woman seemed concerned. When Alara finally stepped back, she looked around the room. "I appreciate everyone attending." Her voice carried confidence born from experience. "I know many questions have been raised regarding my father's message." Ethan folded his arms. "Then perhaps you should answer them." Alara nodded. "That is why I came." The room fell silent. She placed a collection of documents on the table. Maps, trade records, diplomatic agreements, carefully organized. 3 years ago, she began, multiple territories throughout the region faced growing instability. Ethan glanced toward the papers. He remembered those years well. Droughts, political disputes, economic struggles. None had escalated into disasters, but together they created uncertainty. Alara continued. Most leaders responded by protecting their own interests. Her gaze shifted toward Olivia. One person chose a different approach. Several representatives smiled knowingly. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. He already knew where this was leading. "The alliances everyone keeps talking about," he said quietly. Alara nodded. "They exist because Olivia helped create them." The room became perfectly still. Ethan looked toward Olivia. She remained calm, almost uncomfortable with the attention. Yet for the first time, he was beginning to understand the true scale of what she had accomplished while he was busy regretting what he had lost. The revelation settled over the assembly hall like a rising tide. For several moments, nobody spoke. The representatives seated around the circular table exchanged thoughtful glances while Princess Alara's documents remained spread before them. Maps covered with trade routes. Agreements signed by leaders from distant territories. Records showing years of cooperation that most people in Blackthorn had never known existed. Ethan studied the pages carefully. Every document told the same story. While he had spent 3 years governing a kingdom, Olivia had spent 3 years building something far less visible and perhaps far more powerful. Trust. Across the table, Olivia shifted slightly in her chair. The attention clearly made her uncomfortable. Ethan noticed the detail immediately. It would have been easy for someone else to enjoy the admiration filling the room. Olivia never seemed interested in admiration. She only cared about results. Princess Alara smiled as though reading his thoughts. "She is going to hate this part." Several people laughed softly. Olivia sighed. "Alara, you know I am right." The princess turned toward the gathering. Half the agreements represented here would not exist without her. Olivia opened her mouth to protest. Alara raised a hand. "You can argue later." More laughter followed. The atmosphere relaxed for the first time all morning. Ethan found himself watching Olivia instead of the documents. Not because of what she had accomplished, because of how naturally other people trusted her. The governors, the elders, the merchants, even a princess. None treated her as someone they followed out of obligation. They treated her like someone they genuinely respected. The difference mattered. It was the same lesson she had tried to explain in the courtyard. Loyalty freely given, not demanded. One of Ethan's advisors finally leaned forward. "If all of this is true, why come back now?" The question immediately silenced the room. Olivia folded her hands on the table. For a moment, she simply looked at the maps before answering. "Because the region is changing." The advisor frowned. "That is not an answer." "It is." Her voice remained calm. "The old systems are becoming fragile." She glanced around the hall. Kingdoms have spent generations competing against one another when they should have been working together. Several representatives nodded. Olivia continued. "The challenges we face now do not stop at borders." Ethan listened carefully. Something about her words felt larger than politics, more important than alliances. "And your solution?" he asked. Olivia met his gaze directly. "Partnership." The simplicity of the answer surprised many people. Yet nobody dismissed it, because they had already seen evidence that it worked. Princess Alara stood and walked toward one of the maps. "My father agrees." She placed a hand on the table. "That is why he sent the message." Ethan straightened slightly. Then the ultimatum was never an ultimatum. Alara smiled. "Of course not." Several people exchanged confused looks. It was the only way to guarantee everyone's attention. A few representatives laughed. Even Ethan found himself shaking his head. Olivia looked entirely unsurprised. "That sounds exactly like your father." Alara grinned. "I learned from the best." The tension that had followed Olivia's return began dissolving piece by piece. Yet Ethan felt something else replacing it. Clarity. For days he had wondered why she came back. For months he had feared she might return seeking revenge. Looking around the room now, he finally understood how wrong that fear had been. Olivia had not returned to destroy anything. She had returned because she believed something better could be built. And somehow that realization made his regret feel heavier than ever before. The meeting ended hours later, but the conversations it began would continue for years. By late afternoon, snow had stopped falling over Blackthorn City. Pale sunlight broke through the clouds, casting long golden beams across rooftops and frozen streets. Citizens gathered outside the assembly hall waiting for news. Traders, nobles, workers, and travelers stood side by side, all hoping to learn what had happened behind the old stone walls. When the doors finally opened, representatives emerged together. Not separately, together. The sight alone told people more than any announcement could. Rumors spread immediately. Agreements had been reached. Partnerships discussed. New alliances forming. Yet none of those stories traveled as quickly as the one standing near the center of the crowd. Olivia Hayes stepped outside beside Princess Alara and several regional leaders. She looked exactly the same as when she arrived. The same calm expression. The same simple confidence. Yet somehow the entire city seemed to see her differently now. Not as the rejected Omega from years ago. Not as the subject of old gossip. Something had changed. Perhaps not in her. Perhaps in everyone else. Across the square, Ethan emerged from the assembly hall moments later. The crowd immediately parted to allow their Alpha King through. Yet for the first time in years, Ethan barely noticed the deference. His attention remained fixed on Olivia, watching her speak with governors, watching merchants greet her warmly, watching people trust her without being asked. 3 years ago, he believed leadership came from authority. Olivia had spent 3 years proving that leadership could come from service. The lesson was humbling and necessary. As the afternoon light softened, many representatives prepared to leave the city. Carriages waited along the roads. Horses stamped gently against the cold. The work ahead would take months, maybe years. Yet something important had already happened. People who once stood apart were finally speaking to one another. Before departing, Princess Alara embraced Olivia once more. "My father will want updates every week." Olivia laughed. "That sounds exhausting." "It is." Alara smiled. "Which is why I am glad you are helping." Their laughter faded as the princess joined her delegation. One by one, the visitors departed. Eventually, only a handful of people remained in the square. The winter sun hung low above the horizon. Ethan approached quietly. Olivia turned toward him before he spoke. Neither seemed uncomfortable with the silence anymore. It felt different now. Easier. "You were never here to destroy anything," Ethan said. Olivia glanced toward the city beyond the square. Smoke rose from chimneys. "Church B,"